This gentleman has been ambassador to the United States only since October. But his lady tells me that he's been all over the country already. I had hoped perhaps it's his maiden speech, you know, we'll see him for the first, fresh out of the egg, but no. This man has been around a bit. He is a relatively new diplomat. But listen to what he's been doing before he became a diplomat, before he came to Washington. He went through Calcutta University, where he was a triple blue. You know what that means? It means that he got, in effect, his letter in football, tennis, and cricket. Which, and so in a side sort of way, if there are any snotty Baltimore Sun reporters here tonight, he tells me he's got his cricket bat right here between Frank Bird's knees. He also has been Chief Minister of West Bengal. He has been Governor of Punjab, was Minister of Education and Social Welfare under Indira Gandhi, and he is an experienced and well-known lawyer throughout India, having been called to the bar from the Inner Temple of London in 1947. This is the ambassador of India, Siddharta Shankar Ray. Welcome to Baltimore, Mr. Ambassador.
Let me take out my magic things. Mr. Jacobs, do I say friends? If I was addressing you in India, and if this was an Indian meeting, I would have called you sisters and brothers. May I do that here? Yeah. Then sisters and brothers. I'm delighted to be here, but rather nervous after having heard Mr. Jacobs and his brilliant short speech. I'm sure I shall suffer in comparison. But I'm trying my best in every possible way to tell every American, I wish I could go to every American, but to tell every American as far as possible that things have changed in India to such an extent that you shall not be able to recognize it if you had gone there in the 60s or the 70s of this century. But to that, I shall come later. I was asked in a very kind letter from this association to say what subject would I speak on. Now, I was in a quandary because I don't really have many subjects. I'm not an intellectual, nor a philosopher, nor am I an academician. Being a man of law, basically, my knowledge is rather limited to the facts of the case. You know Mark Twain. He was a brilliant speaker, and he had many speaking engagements. When people came to him to request him to come and speak, he would bring out a list of subjects on he would speak if paid his required consideration. So he brought out the list and showed to any intending purchaser of his commodity, namely his speech, and said, here is a list. What subject would you like me to talk upon? So the person or persons who came, they thought a lot, discussed matters amongst themselves, then decided on a subject. When the subject was finalized, money paid or agreed upon, and then after they thanked him, Mr. Mark Twain, and said they'll be waiting for him to come. He said, by the way, I must tell you that there are many subjects, but the speech is the same. Similarly, my speech will be the same. That is to say, I would like to explain to you India. I would like to tell you what India thinks, what India sings, what India dances, how India sings, how India thinks, how India dances, and what is happening in India today. But in doing so, I have to be very, very careful, because I find that as early as in 1604, something had happened to an ambassador. His name was Sir Henry Cotton, and he was an ambassador of King James I in a foreign court. Now he had a friend called Christopher Flockmore. One day, in a moment of levity, he made a note on the album of his friend that an ambassador is an honest man sent to lie abroad for the good of his country. This statement raised many eyebrows in England, including the royal eyebrows of King James I. So he sent for Sir Henry and said, what is all this that I hear about you? You can't say I send ambassadors to lie abroad. Then Sir Henry said, Your Majesty, that's all wrong. What I wanted to say was, ambassadors go abroad and lie in bed abroad. Therefore, they lie abroad. But King James I said, no, I don't accept that explanation. And he was dismissed. Now, I don't mind going away, something of the kind, but I certainly would hate to be dismissed for having lied in this country. So in trying to tell you about India, I have to be very, very careful and see to it that I place before you the facts which are absolutely essential, facts which are there existing today. Moreover, there's another thing. Yours is the most open society in the whole world today. You have an open government, an open society. And this is not new. Many people come and tell me, not now, they've told me years ago, whenever they refer to the United States of America, they say, oh, it's a new country, new people, new culture. I have always said, and I'm glad that I'm today in America, even if it's for the first time, that I can say it here, what I've been saying for years and years, because I believe in what I'm saying now, that America is not a new country in the sense you don't have new people here. You're not a new culture. Your culture is a very ancient culture. Your culture is perhaps as old as any other country's culture. After all, who are your ancestors? Who are the people who had come here as dissenters, as Protestants? They're extremely cultured people. They were disgusted, disillusioned with society, with civilization as it existed in Europe in those days. They rebelled against the evils of the church, the corruption of the church, the dictatorial attitude of the monarch, the corruption in society, evil of society. They had rebelled against that, and they wanted to build a new world, and therefore they wanted to come out. Your ancestors had come out with a mission, and the mission for the achievement of which your ancestors had come out was expressed in very clear words by John Winthrop in early 17th century. On board the good ship Arbella, while in mid-Atlantic, he gave a sermon. And that sermon is quoted today in any book that we have in India on English literature as one of the finest pieces that one could read. He said, in early 17th century, while coming to this country, we must consider that we shall be a city upon a hill. It's a biblical term, but he has accepted that. We shall be a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us, so that if we shall deal falsely, we shall be made a story and a byword throughout the world. You came here with this mission. You will have an open society on a hill. People will watch you. And if you act falsely, you shall become a byword and a story throughout the world. You came here, and you did become a byword, become a story throughout the world, but for entirely different reasons, not for the reason that John Winthrop had suspected. You become a story and a byword in the whole world today as having become one of the greatest democracies, the greatest democracy that we have today in the world, or that perhaps the world will ever know about. Now, to the greatest democracy of this world, I come here as a citizen of the largest democracy. And what I would like to tell you is this: give me one reason why this greatest democracy in the world and the largest democracy in the world should not work hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder, in the closest possible cooperation, amity, and friendship. We had some bad years, I confess. I have been in politics from 1956. Whether I wished it or not, I was in politics. I was in office. I was 6 years Chief Minister of West Bengal. I was for about 4 years Governor of Punjab. I was with Mrs. Gandhi in a cabinet. I've been a member of parliament, I've been a member of the state legislature, and I practiced law in every court. And I've seen India. I've seen public opinion in India. If only I had a time machine, the sort of time machine which H.G. Wells had mentioned, and put you onto that machine and took you back to, let us say, the decade of the 60s or the decade of the 70s, and made you get down from the machine and then declare to the people, Indians, friends, we have recognized Israel, we would have been shot. We would have been thrown out. If he had said then, after getting out from the time machine, that Zionism is not racism, we wouldn't have been heard. There would have been a revolution. If he had said then that the industrial policy of 1956, as formulated and propounded by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, is defective, is wrong, is not acceptable, is not practicable, has to be cast aside, we wouldn't have lived to see the next day. If we had gone in 1970 and said, friends, our troops, our army, our navy are today working shoulder to shoulder with American armed forces in Somalia and under the American flag. Can you imagine what would have happened to us? But when we say these things today, we are praised by the people, commented extremely favorably, commented upon extremely favorably by all the editorials of the leading newspapers. And our media is very, very strong. I mean, it's not only alive. If I may say so, with this is kicking. It's kicking. It keeps you always on your toes. But no criticism whatsoever. Not a word of criticism when the Prime Minister announced that we have recognized Israel. Not a word of criticism when in the United Nations we said no, Zionism cannot be treated as racism. Not a word of criticism when it was announced that a brigade of our army is going to Somalia. that our naval vessels, some of them, are going there. In fact, they are there now. Not a word of criticism. Not a word of criticism when the 1981 industrial policy was announced in August last year, 1991. We have therefore now go forward with the United States with us. I cannot for the life of me find out one reason why we had really not been together long years ago. Look at our commonalities. Look at our similarities. Look at our history. You had your Declaration of Independence, 1776, drafted by Thomas Jefferson. Beautiful language. You were going to fight for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You declared that there can be no government without the consent of the people. You made it quite clear as to what you intended to do in the future in the shape of running your country and your administration. Look at the language, the spirit, and the ideology behind your Declaration of Independence of 1776. And kindly compare that with our Declaration of Independence, which is really the Quit India Resolution of 1942, drafted by Mahatma Gandhi. Yours was drafted by Jefferson, ours by Gandhi. Compare the two languages and see the spirit. It's the same. The idea is the same. The ideology is the same. The goal is the same. You had your Gettysburg Address, Lincoln. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. This nation shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall never perish from the earth. You thought of the birth of freedom. Look at our Tryst of Destiny speech by Nehru. What did he say? He didn't use the words 77 years ago. But he said, long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem, perhaps not fully, but substantially, our pledge. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will wake to life and freedom, the freedom that Abraham Lincoln had talked about. A moment comes, which comes rarely in history, when we step out from the old to the new, when an age ends, and when the soul of a nation, long suppressed, finds utterance. And we found utterance, inspired by your Bill of Rights, inspired by the 4 essential freedoms mentioned by Roosevelt in January 1941. When we came to draft our Constitution, we looked at your Bill of Rights. Your Bill of Rights are from the 1st to the 10th Amendment of your Constitution. They came in by way of amendments. And then later, another very important amendment, the 14th Amendment, after the Dred Scott's case, which laid down equality before the laws. Now take this first 10 amendments of your Constitution, and then the 14th Amendment of your Constitution, and then come to our Constitution, come to a fundamental rights chapter. You will see that from Article 13 to Article 27, the same thing is there. The idea is the same, the spirit is the same, the ideology is the same. In some cases, the language is the same. The due process clause, the equality clause, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, freedom of association, all that which you see in your Bill of Rights, you will see in our Constitution. And another thing, which I find many people do not know here, it's our fault. We had not paid that attention which we should have to the greatest democracy in this world. We should have come and explained these things. We should have seen people. We should have propagated this thing. After 1950, when our Supreme Court of independent India came into existence, perforce, the Supreme Court had to interpret our Constitution. And when they came to interpret Articles 13 to Article 26, they saw that in many places, the language was the same as your Constitution. So, if you take any volume of the Supreme Court of India and look at the reported judgments, you will see repeatedly decisions of the American Supreme Court are cited, referred to, and relied upon. There is no lawyer worth his salt in India today who has not got a set of the American Supreme Court reports in his chambers. Come to my chambers in Delhi, go to anybody else's chambers, you will find a set of the United States Supreme Court reports, set of American law jurisprudence or corpus juris. These commonalities are commonalities which have existed from the very beginning. But somehow or other we have not noticed it, that we had to sail on the same boat because we had common roots, common ideas, so many common things. We were trying to reach a common goal. We couldn't reach a common goal without being much closer. It's a matter of great regret. That's the message which I want to give. That's the thing that's the only speech which I wish to make everywhere in America. Maybe other things will come in. But this is the theme of my speech. If I put it in rather hackneyed language, this is the theme of my song, if this can at all be a song. In the words of Jefferson again, who's tremendously respected in India, we want peace, we want commerce, and we want honest friendship. That is all that we want. And we want to do it together. Ezra Pound, not liked by all in this country, but sometimes he wrote beautifully. And he wrote a poem called A Pact. He was really criticizing or trying to say something about Walt Whitman. But there are two lines in that poem which it seems he had written with what I'm just saying to you in mind. He had said, we have one sap, one root, let there be commerce between us. That's all that we want. We have one sap, we have one root, and let there be commerce between us. Now, we have always looked upon your land in our mind's eye, in our intellect, in our hearts, as the land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside let freedom ring. Words of Samuel Francis Smith. These words we had always in mind, but we have never been able to come across each other in a much more clearer and intimate manner. But whatever has happened, has happened. We cannot talk of what had happened in the past and go on criticizing each other. We have criticized each other enough. Therefore, today, we do not want to talk of yesterday. We want to talk of tomorrow. And tomorrow's vision must include, as one of its most essential parts, the United States of America and India working together, hand in hand, in the closest possible cooperation, amity, and friendship. I said this in my remarks to President Bush when I placed my credentials before him. And President Bush, in his reply to my remarks, said, "Mr. Ambassador, in your remarks, you stress the need to formulate a vision for tomorrow, one which includes India and the United States working together in understanding, amity, and friendship. You may rest assured that Americans subscribed to this vision. As democracies that have enshrined fundamental rights of our citizens, we can do no less than to work to build such a special relationship." This is very heartening. There clearly has been a meeting of minds. Only this morning, and it gave me tremendous joy when I heard this from President-elect Clinton. Only this morning, he met President-elect Clinton and Vice President-elect Go met the diplomatic corps. Early in the morning, we had breakfast there at the University of Georgetown, spoke to the diplomats. Then he individually talked to each and every diplomat. When my turn came, I mentioned to him that our Prime Minister had recently said, when some of your senators had gone to visit him, that the senators wanted to know from him what was the effect in India of the coming into power or of the victory of the Democratic Party in the elections. And the Prime Minister said to them that whenever the Democratic Party comes to power in the United States, we in India have a feeling, we do not know whether that feeling is right or wrong, or whether that actually happens or not, but we have a feeling that an extra dimension has been added to the relationship between the United States of America and India. I told this to President-elect Clinton, and I said, we don't know whether it's true or not, but our people believe that an extra dimension is created whenever the Democratic Party comes to power. Then Mr. Clinton said, we shall have to work out and see that that happens this time. And we shall meet. I was delighted. Nothing could be better. Therefore, we proceed on the basis that the future that we see, not only in our mind's eye, but in front of us, will be a future of amity and friendship. It is true that we suffer from rather hiccups here now and again, sometimes serious hiccups. But we somehow managed to get over those hiccups. We have announced a very ambitious economic policy. And this new policy, and that is what I want to tell you about today, includes or involves three main things. One, removal of all regulatory industrial restrictions. The framework has to be freed of this regulatory measures. Two, liberalization of policies on foreign investment. Number three, liberalization and streamlining of our trade policy. This will affect every area. It will affect trade, it will affect money and finance, it will affect exchange rates, it will affect tax laws, it will affect investment policies. It would mean streamlining of procedures, which have been done. It would mean deregulation, which have been done. It would mean delicensing, which has been done. It would mean automatic approvals of foreign investments in many cases. The word approval, unfortunately, still remains, because perhaps you're aware that a bureaucrat will never say that anything can be done without approval. So the Prime Minister said, doesn't matter. Let the word approval remain, but it will become automatic. If anybody makes an application, it's automatically approved in certain areas. So it's automatic approval now. And new areas of investments have to be created in the private sector. The first thing that was done was, prior to August 1991, no foreigner, no foreign corporation could invest more than 40% in any particular corporation in India. They could not hold more than 40% of the shares in that corporation. The first thing that was done was to amend that and allowing majority holding, in some cases 100% holding, of shares in foreign companies. 34 priority industrial areas or industry areas have been specifically mentioned, where there will be no restriction. Come forward, form your company, majority will be yours. And in the power sector, if you want to have generation of power, if you want to have distribution of power, you can form companies and you can have 100% foreign holding. There will be no difficulty whatsoever. Similarly, with regard to oil exploration and oil production, similar provisions have been made. I don't want to bore you with all the details that have been undertaken in this line, but the objects of our economic reforms are really threefold. First, to make our economy more market-oriented. Two, to integrate our economy with the global economy. And the ultimate goal is, within the shortest possible time, to make our rupee freely convertible throughout the markets in the world. And thirdly, to divest 49% of the government shares in public sector undertakings by following a certain process of mutual funds so that private sector can come in everywhere. This process, sometimes persons question us, is this a reversible process? My answer is, this process is irreversible. Why? Because the policy was announced not by one political party or two political parties getting together. It was passed on the basis of national consensus. And that is the style of the present Prime Minister of India. This was passed on the basis of national consensus. Therefore, there's no question of this being reversed. It's an irreversible process that we have adopted. Secondly, there is in India today a middle class, upper middle class and middle class, if I may use that expression, of 200 million persons. This class is a market which is waiting to be served. If you do not serve this market, you are in the worst possible danger. This 200 million people will not allow you to reverse your industrial policy. Show me one democracy in the whole world where there are 200 million people, middle class, market waiting to be served. After I ceased to be the governor of Punjab, came back to my profession, Supreme Court. I had been absent for 4 years. I wanted a telephone. I said I won't go through the special priority channels that are there. I'll try in the ordinary way. I'm a Supreme Court advocate. I'm a senior Supreme Court advocate. I had to get a telephone myself. So I applied, and the rule applied to me also. I saw that there's no chance of my getting a telephone the next 2 years or so. Because that's the market. We want hundreds of people coming in the telecommunication thing. In fact, recently it has been announced that a private sector may come into the telecommunication field. Television sets, telephones, these are very minor matters. Insofar as the United States of America is concerned, it's nothing. Television sets, telephone sets, refrigerators, motor cars. You have a long waiting list. Because we had restricted production, because of the various controls that we had, it was very difficult to proceed, advance, expand, increase. And therefore, these 200 million people will not allow this particular policy to be reversed. This emergent middle class has become a very, very important factor in India today. Now, this 200 million people, a minor part, a negligible part of that has come to your country. You see them here, working as doctors, working as scientists, working as technological people, working in your universities, working in factories, working in your courts of law. This is only, I don't know, 0.0005% of the middle class that we have. President Bush, in his remarks again, when I placed my credentials, told me, Mr. Ambassador, you have over 1 million people, you have over 1 million of your countrymen in our country today. He said they're doing extremely well and rendering useful service to this country, particularly in the field of medicine, science, and technology. Now this 1 million people that you say is nothing compared to the 200 million that's still there. So that's the market. We have the world's 3rd largest pool of technical manpower waiting there in India, sometimes not used at all. Therefore, we say that these economic programs will succeed. Why? For two particular reasons. Firstly, there are tremendous business opportunities which exist in India today. And there are several factors which make India an extremely attractive investment proposition. What are the factors? First, I mentioned about the market, 200 million upper and middle class people. Industrial base. It's one of the most mature industrial base that a country can possibly possess. The British had, of course, ruled us. We, of course, had our Declaration of Independence against them. But they had done a lot of good work, too. They had built our industrial base from about the 70s, the last year. And we have that industrial base that is there for nearly 125 years. We had large industries, we had medium industries, we had small-scale industries, but of course not in the scale that we have now or that we propose to have in the future. But we have the base, we have the knowledge, we have the technology. The political system is sound, not only in theory, but also in practice. There have been repeated elections. There have been 45 summers, 45 winters, 45 springs, 45 autumns that have passed since we had achieved independence. And the course of this 45 years, there have been numerous elections. There have been representation from the people, government of the people, run by the people. I have personally gone through 10 elections. I have won 8 and lost 2. Because the reasons are dangerous. The reasons are dangerous in this sense that every moment of my life at home, I'm reminded of this. In the 8 elections that I had won, I had my wife as my election agent. In the 2 that I lost, I said, "You're not necessary." And I lost both. So at home, whenever there's a decision to be taken, I can't have any independent choice whatsoever, because I'm always reminded of these 2 defeats. But this shows that we have had numerous elections still going on. There's a free press, there's a multi-party system, there's a stabilized banking system. It's very important. Our Negotiable Instrument Act was passed in 1882. We have had checks and promissory notes and bills of exchange, commercial bills of exchange, from the 80s of the last century. The other day, I was talking to some friends from your country who had just come back from Russia, and they were telling me the difficulty about the banking system there and the doubt expressed by certain people about just paper being treated as money, that is, checks being treated as money. But in India, this has been going on for a long, long time. From the 80s of the last century, there's a well-established and stabilized banking system. There has been a scam or 2 recently. But then in which country has there not been a scam? The fact that there's been a scam proves that ours is a democracy. Because if this was a dictatorship, either A, nobody would have discovered the scam had taken place, or B, no scam could take place. But in our country, you can't hide it under the carpet. It comes out. There's a judicial system. I told you about our constitution and your constitution. Apart from the constitution, our whole law is based on the same rule of law that your law is based on. It's the common law of England again, which is still a very relevant factor in our law, our commercial law particularly, our law of contract, our corporation law, the Indian Companies Act, the numerous sections in the Indian Companies Act which are absolutely the same as the British Companies Act or in your corporation law. In various other matters, in the commercial field, in the non-commercial field, you will find that the laws are the same. So the judicial system exists, and a judicial system which is known to you. Commercial arbitrations is a well-established procedure. There are special arbitral tribunals set up by our various chambers of commerce, which have a regular system of commercial arbitration. Apart from that, the International Chamber of Commerce, their rules and regulations apply, and we have arbitration before the International Chamber of Commerce Arbitral Tribunal also. I've been in Paris on a number of occasions with regard to cases from India before the International Chamber of Commerce there. Our saving rates is fairly high, around 22%. And what is most important, our language is English. In our courts of law, you have to speak in English. The language of commerce is English. The language of law is English. The language of our bills and enactments is English. In fact, the universally accepted language all over India is English. It is no wonder, therefore, that there have been, in recent years, several agencies, well-known agencies, who have taken steps, taken the trouble to investigate, go to India, and find out what the position is. One of such organizations is the Foreign Investment Advisory Service, known as the FIAS. It's a joint venture of the International Finance Corporation and Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. It is going into a deep study of India and the conditions in India with regard to investment. Then there is a mission from the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. They conducted a workshop for Indian corporations and the range of their activities. Thirdly, the World Bank has moved in and has granted a loan of $400 million for the purpose of financing our economic policy based on a proposal for supporting India's trade liberalization policy. This money will help create and sustain an enabling environment that will facilitate and promote trade. Then the Export-Import Bank of the United States of America, namely this particular bank, the Exim Bank, has financed loans and on all loans and guarantees for exports to India, its investment in this sphere has gone up from $12 million to $1.5 billion. The Overseas Private Investment Corporation, which is an agency for investment by American companies, by private they encourage private investments. They are about to go to India for the purpose of ascertaining the areas where investment should take place. The government is therefore committed to the reform of the financial sector. A new labor policy is coming up, somewhat in the nature of your NAFTA, with regard to our public sector units, which have become, which are not giving us profits, which have become sick. Thirdly, as I've already said, we are trying for full convertibility of the rupee. And fourthly, there has been already further traffic reductions. The highest rate, further tariff reductions. The highest rate has already gone down from 200% to 110%. Capital goods and machinery have been given a reduction from 80% to 50%. and concessional windows. There are numerous concessional windows which would bring this to 25 to 15% only if certain conditions are followed. Remember, all this has to proceed on the basis of social and political consensus. We have a weak social security net, and we have to make that social security net stronger. So whatever we do, we have to do it on the basis of political and social consensus. Secondly, scope and pace of our economic reforms have naturally to be politically and socially acceptable. But various things have already happened. And this would indicate to you, I know these are dull, these figures are dull, but it gives great satisfaction to all the people who are trying to work out the reforms. Between August 1991 and August 1992, 7,400 investment intentions have been filed by the domestic industries. This is 4,000 more than before. Foreign investment approvals from August 1991 to August 1992 has increased to $1.2 billion. Only a year ago, it was only $70 million. From 70 million, it's gone up to $1.2 billion. 1,600 foreign technology agreements have been filed, and 240 of them from the United States alone. 5% growth has taken place in the export, despite the 40% loss in trade in view of the collapse of the Soviet Union. Now, inflation after the reforms has come down from 17% to 9%. Budget deficit has been reduced from 8.5% of the GDP to 5% of GDP this year. Export growth, there is about 5% in dollar terms, but in so far as the United States of America is concerned, our exports have increased by 19% by September 1992, after the reforms were announced, and industrial production is keeping up. And exports to the free currency areas have grown by about 12% in volume terms from January 1992 till December 1992. Therefore, President Bush again, in his remarks, when I placed my credentials, said, new opportunities for expanded cooperation between our two countries are evident in the economic field, where Prime Minister Rao has taken bold new steps to reform the Indian economy. As you state, the United States already is India's main trading partner and its largest source of foreign investment. American firms will look increasingly at India with its vibrant private sector, highly trained workforce, and large middle-class market as an excellent place to invest and trade. But in spite of this, in spite of the United States having become our first trading partner, we are the 32nd trading partner of the United States. We have to go up the ladder a little, and we shall try our best to do so. And our exports to the United States is only 0.63% of the total exports to the United States. We'll have to improve here, because until and unless we improve in our exports considerably and raise our exports to between 15 to 20% in dollar terms, we shall not be able to really deal with the difficulties that we sometimes face on the financial side. And on this, we shall, of course, be trying to seek your assistance, seek the assistance of the companies, corporations, traders, businessmen, industries that are in this country. And while doing so, we'll perhaps mention one fact which I'll say to this before I end. I've nearly talked for an hour, which is a long time. Long years ago, in the 1850s, you were in trouble. You had the Unionists and you had the Confederacy. And the Confederacy was demanding that it should become a separate political unit altogether, a separate state, separate from the northern part of America. Now the Confederacy wanted to have this, did not have anything to do, did not want to have anything to do with the Unionists, but they didn't know how to achieve this. So they decided upon a plan. There was the Secretary of State of the Confederacy called Robert Toombs. He worked on a plan. He said we'll have to get Great Britain to recognize us, the Confederacy, as an independent, separate state. So he told his people that what we should do is this. We give an ultimatum, let us give an ultimatum to Great Britain to recognize us, or else there are 3,000 cotton mills working in Great Britain today will not get an ounce of the cotton which is produced in our states in the Confederacy, and that accounts for 77% of the cotton requirements of the 3,000 cotton mills that work in the Great Britain. And if we do this, they'll be compelled to recognize us as an independent country, and America would have been partitioned as India was.
We've been very guilty here in prevailing too long upon the
it's all right.
upon the ambassador. And Mr. Jacobs, please.